In today's spooky video, we're going to be looking at the final figure from the McFarlane Toys Clive Barker Presents Tortured Souls Series 2 The Fallen, as we have a look at Moribundi. Oh, McFarlane, how do you do? Love your harnessed characters. Well, Moribundi is another one of those examples. Let's get some dimensions going first before we have a look at the figure. If you want to technically count just the figure, Moribundi is about 5 inches in height. Now, of course, factoring in that he's attached to this contraption, the figure as a whole is closer to about 8 inches in height. Yes, McFarlane, you certainly have upped your game here, as this wave of Tortured Souls features not one, not two, but 3 harnessed, if you want to count them as harnessed characters, as Moribundi here is the third release, third version of a harnessed character. And what do I mean by harnessed? It's essentially a figure that really isn't on his own or her own. It's spread across some framework or contraption that's kind of keeping the figure all upright. Of course, we had a look. The other examples, by the way, were Feverish and Zane. Those were the other 2 figures. Of course, we're going to recap the entire wave at the end of this video, so if you guys want to see all of them together, stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, let's look at Moribundi. What an interesting looking and interesting named figure. Comes with a couple of accessories, very, very small accessories. Once again, kind of like Feverish, I almost lost them. Comes with this little breathing apparatus. Look how small that is by the backdrop of my fingers. Very, very small. Ideally, it's supposed to go into the mouth area. And I don't know why, but I seem to have butterfingers when it comes to holding small objects like this. It's supposed to mount just kind of into the mouth like this. It does a good enough job, and luckily, if you don't want to have him displayed with that, if you remove it outward, it doesn't look like the mouth is supposed to have something. Whereas sometimes if you have figures that are supposed to hold something in their mouths and you remove it, or a mask or anything like that, the face clearly looks like it's supposed to hold it. Well, no, this you can have either or. You can have it with the little breathing mask, or you can have it completely out, and it looks perfectly fine as well. One of the really neat things that he does come included with, too, is this mask. Kind of like a clay porcelain sort of mask. It reminds me of the mask killer from the remake of House of Wax, which actually was a pretty good movie if you haven't seen House of Wax. And this can also fit over his face, which does a really great job of masking, no pun intended, the gruesomeness that is underneath. I do actually quite think the mask looks neat. Or again, you can just take that off and you can remove it and just display him in all his gruesome splendor. As it goes from just a figure standpoint, the design is interesting. One of the more gruesome representations in the Tortured Souls Series 2 lineup. As poor Moribundi, you can see, has just been peeled away. All the individual layers of skin have been peeled away and hooked themselves up onto the sides of the frames here. His head also has been peeled away, or not so much his head, but the top of his head has been peeled away, exposing his brain, and that has also been peeled back and hooked onto these hooks on the back. Apologies by myself should be made, again, to the younger viewers. I know for you guys that like tuning in for like the more lighthearted sort of videos, I know these ones probably aren't the most, well, kid-friendly. And to parents watching, their kids watching these videos, I do apologize. Of course, Tortured Souls is not probably something that a younger kid should probably be wanting to collect and display. I mean, these are kind of gross, I will admit. Even for a guy like myself who has grown up loving horror movies, like these figures really are the epitome of gruesome and grotesque. We will push on nonetheless, though, and still have a look at the face. Actually, is rather interesting because, of course, the face has been peeled away, but kind of reminds me of Frank from the Hellraiser, of course, the Hellraiser series, which was also come to us from Clive Barker. No coincidence there, of course. You can see that the hands have been impaled onto the top portions, and of course now cascading, dripping a river of blood down the side. It's not so much a river, it's kind of a trickling of blood down the side harness, or I don't even know what you would call this. It's not quite a gurney, I don't really know. It kind of looks like a coat rack. A very horrific, hellish version of a coat rack. I guess he was going to get his jacket, and this is what ends up happening. That's why you never leave your jacket at the coat check area of a hotel or any outing. Take your jacket with you. You keep that with you at all times, because this is essentially what would end up happening. I thought this part right here, this little wire, was a glue, and then I realized on the back here, it's just this small wire that's attaching to this little fragment of flesh. Just, again, a little extra stuff, a little extra I love you from McFarlane. No, we don't have enough peelings of flesh. Let's incorporate one right here too with this little wire. Some tubes of blood, a canister of blood. I don't know if he's giving blood or if he's donating blood, or I don't know if he's receiving blood, or I don't know if he's donating blood. I would think maybe at the state of what he looks like, I'm going to guess that he's donating blood, probably against his wishes. It's not something he's volunteered for. Luckily, cleanliness is very much a concern at this place, because they put like a little drip trap here, a little drip tray, to prevent any additional spillage. You know, of course, if something's dripping out from a severed limb, you like to think, of course, the floor is going to keep relatively clean, because we're of a utmost high hygiene level of establishment here. Luckily, the little drip tray is going to prevent any sort of spillage on the floor. We can't afford to have anybody slipping on some guy's poor blood pool that's forming up somewhere. By the way, these wheels are movable. You can rotate them. So, luckily, Moribundi can spin around. I mean, it's, again, it kind of reminds me of, very much like a coat rack. We spin the figure around, and for a part that you really wouldn't see, because I'm assuming most collectors, at least I'm thinking from my mindset, I would probably display them like this. If for some reason you're a weirdo and you like to display your figures from their backs, luckily at least they sculpt the back. They put as much care into the back as they did to the front. And here we've got some, looks like some strappings, again, decay in the leg, the peeled away flesh, which is slightly translucent, but you really can't see it because they've added so much extra paint there. And then you can see the hooks there as they are pulling away the flesh and the top crown of the head and hooking themselves onto these hooks. Really, no assembly was required for this guy, except for this part here came detached. I just attached it to the side, and I had to attach the front and the back wheels. Everything else basically was, as you see right here. It was one of the simplest, most straightforward figures to actually put together of the Tortured Soul line. And I think, trying to think of the worst one to put together, that's a tough one. Some of the worst ones was, I would say probably, now that I'm thinking about, maybe Zane was really difficult to put together because I just couldn't figure out where everything went, and I had to look online to accomplish that. But let's look at his posability. He does have just a little bit. Once again, he's got a swivel in the head. Why? I would ask why. Why allowed? I know this figure line is a little older, but why still, I would want to ask, 2002, that's when this figure line got released, so about 15 years later. I posed the question, why would you have a hinge in the head when clearly the head is attached to these hooks? Moving the head any bit way, I would worry that these would rip out of the hooks or damage the hooks in the process. So again, I would just leave it as is. Other than that, I can't really see any sort of articulation to this guy. Maybe, yeah, he's got a little bit in the lower leg, but again, that's been strapped, just to make sure that the leg doesn't go anywhere. It's been strapped with a belt around the under area of this coat rack. A little bit of articulation there, but really, I don't get why. And by the way, so once again, there's Moribundi. Let's bring in some of the other cast and crew that made up the Tortured Souls Series 2, The Fallen, because of course you guys would probably all want to see them together. So there is Suffering Bob. I love that name. Suffering Bob, Billy Zane. His name's actually just Zane. And reaching off, I have him wheeled. I'll wheel him in here. Right there. Let's move Suffering Bob a little to the front. There's Feverish. And we'll also bring in Camille Noir, which I actually quite like that figure. Just move Zane slightly out of the way. You know, anyone looking at this from a distance would just think, what is going on all here? There's a lot of busy stuff happening. And then finally, we'll bring in Zaltax, which was also the first figure. And I had mentioned it took cues from looking like an insect. I think it's actually supposed to be a spider woman. So there you go. That adds to eliminating hopefully some of the mystique behind her. There are all your 6 figures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 figures of the Tortured Souls Series 2, The Fallen line. Out of these 6 figures, let me know down below which one you like the most. I think from its presence, surprisingly enough, I'm just going to kind of move these guys all slightly over. Surprisingly enough, one of my favorites, which is one of the figures that I started with, and I don't want to say dismissed, but I didn't really like the insectoid look that Zaltax had. And sure enough, she almost ended up being my favorite. In fact, I would say she may be my favorite from this wave, if I, of course, not try to drop her. Feverish is good from its size. He's got a good size to him. And, you know, the gremlins are a neat little touch. He's clearly heavy on a framework. And I know initially I kind of said he was a middle of the mark figure, but kind of now as I look across the board, this gruesome board of Tortured Soul figures, I might say Zoltax is my favorite. Zaltax is my favorite, followed by Camille Noir. I kind of really dig the little buzzsaw halo that she's got there. Least favorites, I probably would say Zane. And I'm almost even in the same mindset when it comes to Moribundi. I mean, again, this wave, half the 6 of the 6 figures, so giving us 3 figures, and all coincidentally enough, the figures that are in the back, let me just move those others out of the way here. She somehow has a difficult time standing at times. We'll just move Suffering Bob out of the way. Funny enough, though, these 3 figures all are so heavily requiring a frame, a contraption, some sort of apparatus to kind of get the point across. The figures individually are somewhat a little on the boring side. Moribundi at least has a little bit more going on for him. But again, this is a wave where McFarlane Toys really likes his contraptions, as you can see with the 3 figures here. Of the, quote, harnessed figures, as you saw with 3 of the 6 figures being in harnesses or contraptions, I think Moribundi is the more interesting of the 3. Zane was okay, but the figure as a whole was somewhat boring. Feverish, on the other hand, has his larger size, but again, if not for the gremlins and the contraption that he was sitting on top of, I think he would almost be a slightly boring figure as well. Moribundi, I think, as mentioned, he's probably the more interesting of the 3 figures. He looks like, granted, that he's hanging himself onto a coat rack from hell, but still, he's got neat enough personality to him, and I do like the fact that you can swap out, as you see here. I've got currently the mask on his face, which is, I think, the route I might end up going if I end up displaying this guy. The little small breathing apparatus, much like the eyeball of Feverish, is so small, guaranteed I'm probably going to lose it. But this is probably the look I'm going to go with, incorporating the mask. Again, thank you for all you guys who have taken the time to watch these 6 videos, as we, of course, have covered off and finished off the Clive Barker Presents Tortured Souls Series 2 of the Fallen figures. I know specifically this year, when I was planning out to do the spooky spots, I really wanted to bring a lot more to the table than some of the previous years, and I know one of the things that you guys had asked for was the Tortured Souls line. And I couldn't do it enough justice to just cover the Tortured Souls Series 1. I want to also bring forward and present to you guys the Tortured Souls Series 2. So I hope collectively between the Series 1 and the Series 2, I have fulfilled your satiable appetite for all things horror and gory. Again, to the younger viewers, I do apologize, as these series of videos, and of course the Series 1, are a little bit more scarier to the younger viewers who come to this channel as well to watch superhero reviews and all that kind of stuff as well. So, of course, those videos will still be coming your way. But, of course, for the month of Spocktober, I want to do something a little bit scarier and gruesome. And I definitely would say the Tortured Souls have fulfilled that. If you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe to this channel, make sure you hit that little subscribe button down below. Don't wait for a coat rack from hell to do it. Hit that little subscribe button down below. You won't miss a beat when it comes to future videos. If you, of course, haven't had a chance to check out also the Tortured Souls Series 1, or for that matter, maybe you missed out on some of the previous Tortured Souls Series 2 figures, don't worry, don't worry. I've got playlists for both of them that you can go back and watch at your viewing pleasure. One thing I have to mention, as this seemed to have now been a very long wrap-up of this video, one thing I also have to mention too as well, is I know a lot of times the videos that I put up on YouTube, sometimes you guys don't get a chance to see all of them that are available. And in the past, I know I've mentioned to mark that little bell notification down below so you'll never miss future videos, but make sure you also go back to my homepage, and just below the featured video, click on videos, you'll see all the videos, basically everything I've posted in the last several months. Scroll down there. If maybe there's a video on there that you haven't seen yet, by all means, check it out and feel free to comment in that video. It lets me know that you guys are also watching not only the newer stuff, but of course all the older stuff that I've put up there as well. As always, guys, thanks for watching as you always do. I'll see you next time.